Okay, we're getting back to the first global revolution. We are still in chapter 7, and this is video 6 of this chapter. Development versus underdevelopment. The third immediacy is a crucial element in the first global revolution. The present situation of a number of countries of the southern hemisphere is in a state of constant deterioration for a number of causes we will analyze further on. According to the World Bank estimates 1990, 1 billion human beings in those countries are presently living under the threshold of absolute poverty, with an income of less than 370 US dollars per year, as opposed to 500 million in the early 1980s. There is reason to believe that the aggravation of underdevelopment, poverty, famine, and malnutrition will continue throughout the coming years despite the constitution of exceptional zones of development. Here it is important to keep in mind the different economic levels from which countries started out, since, as has been stressed in this book, it is no longer correct to treat the so-called third world as homogeneous. In particular, our concern is with the least developed nations, most of which are in Africa, and many of which gained their independence from the colonial powers only in the post-World War II period. Thus, they had either to start from scratch or to attempt to convert a highly dependent colonial economic structure into one which had to be oriented more clearly to domestic needs and national interests. This entailed diversifying both exports and sources of financial support. The mixed, newly industrialized countries of Asia have had a different experience based on a separate strategy and have been remarkably successful in adapting to the world economy and in raising their own living standards. Other countries, particularly India and China, have quite different characteristics from the least developed countries and those of the Pacific Rim dynamic market economies. The Latin American countries with a long history of independence are nevertheless highly dependent on trade in basic commodities. At the same time, in several major cases, they are undergoing rapid industrialization. Among the Latin American countries, a few notably weak economies are close to the least developed. This is also true in the small island states of the Caribbean. Inadequacies of development policies in the past 20 years, remember this is written in 1991, so that would be 38 years ago, or past 38 years. A large number of the least developed economies was encouraged to start out by adopting huge industrial and infrastructural projects involving high construction costs on the capital-intensive Western model. They seriously neglected basic rural and small industrial development that could have brought immediate benefit to large sectors of the population instead of to small minorities. Many of those large investments have failed in their objectives. Policies adopted from the Western industrial countries have often clashed with local customs and structures and induced rejection by the very people they were supposed to benefit. People-oriented development was traditionally set aside in favor of projects that only rich countries could afford. Not only was it the result of the desire of leaders to achieve extremely rapid transformation of their economies and societies, but it was aided, abetted, and often proposed by international agencies and bilateral North-South programs. Such policies have resulted in a long series of projects which, among other things, have plunged many countries into debt and financial disorder with little solid benefit. Outstanding have been the large dams, of which Aswan in Egypt is a leading example, although many more could be mentioned in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. There has been a catalog of disasters, with past lessons being neither learned nor understood. Hundreds of thousands of people have been displaced without any previously prepared settlements to receive them. Waterborne epidemic diseases have been disseminated. Local environment has been disrupted. The frequent ecological and human disasters subsequent to these large projects have often caused unprecedented financial waste. Macro projects such as Itaipu in Brazil and the Narmada project in India are also telling examples. Iron and steel, petrochemical, and shipbuilding installations have mainly proved uneconomic and have come under much criticism. Much of these projects have also given too little consideration to environmental implications, to the effect upon displacement, manpower needs, maintenance, and so on. In many cases, even in the semi-industrialized countries, industrial development based on import substitution policies requiring extremely high tariff and non-tariff protection has produced heavy disparities between the modern sectors and the traditionally poor rural sectors, from which populations have drifted to the big cities as cheap labor. Often they have merely joined the already vast number of urban marginal settlers living in subhuman conditions. And we have a boxed quote: "Hunger is ashamed of no one and does not fear God. Only organized and conscious work can make it retreat." And that's by a farmer in Burkina Faso. The people of the slums, the favelas, and the bidonvilles. The urban population of developing countries went from 90 million in 1900 to nearly 1 billion in 1985, and has been rising at a rate of over 40 million per year. 2/3 of the population of Latin America is urbanized, while urbanization in Africa increased from a ratio of 5% in 1900 to 25% in 1985. 61% of the world's city population live in Asia, where the evolution of the rate of urbanization is comparable to that of undeveloped countries. According to the latest United Nations estimates, the number of city dwellers will have reached about 2 billion by the year 2000, with a 109% increase in Africa, 50% in Latin America, 65% in Asia. There are a number of reasons for this. Rural depopulation is constantly bringing into the outskirts of the large cities streams of people driven from their land by poverty and the impossibility of survival, but also as a result of local wars, some 20 in Africa alone. Large infrastructural projects requiring the displacement of the population, etc. It is important to accept, however, that although rural depopulation in favor of big cities can be slowed down, it can certainly not be stopped. A first reason is that cities exercise a powerful attraction on the younger rural population wishing to flee an unbelievable poverty. For these youngsters, cities with their relative modernity represent hope. Another reason is that any progress in the area of agricultural production deprives a growing percentage of young people at their work. As it happened in Western countries, they go to the cities in hope of finding a new kind of work, even if it is only small trades. The true fascination exercised by the small cities on people, young and not so young, is based on a set of rational and irrational motivations. As Mattei Dogen and John D. Gasarda wrote in A World of Giant Cities, the cities act, this is open quote, cities act like gigantic Las Vegas in the sense that the bulk of their populations are gamblers, though the games are different. Instead of a roulette or blackjack, their names are job security, individual social mobility, better access to education for the children, and hospitals for the sick. Wonderful stories circulate about the happy few who made it in a big way. Close quote. We'll pick up in the next video.